So I received a question from a Substack subscriber, and it is a good one. It's actually a question I get asked a lot. And here is the question. It is from Sharon, and it is, could you give me your testimony? How and when did you become a believer? Were your parents Christians? Thank you, Tom, for that question. And like I said, I get some form of this question a lot, whether by email or in a comment or my post. A lot of people want to know my testimony, and I understand that because I am very curious about other people's testimonies and how they came to know Jesus. But I will say, I kind of find it hard to give my testimony, and I'll tell you why. There are some people out there that are really good at giving their testimony. If you give them 20 minutes, they can tell you their whole story, their whole testimony, and I've always admired people who could do that. I found that whenever I try to give my testimony in like a succinct way, I never do a great job. I always come off feeling like it's a bit shallow or I missed certain things, and that kind of frustrated me because you would think as a writer I'd be able to condense my story down to a good little testimony. But maybe it is because I am a writer that I do see my life as a big story, and I always struggle to know like which part do I leave out, which part do I include, what's really important to tell the story of my testimony. And I was thinking about this, and an analogy came to me. And I want to know what you guys think about this. It's not a perfect analogy, but see what you think. I think for some people, their testimony about how they met Jesus is kind of like a marriage ceremony. If you think about two people, when they get married, the moment they get married, there is a clear delineator. In this moment, they were not married, and now when they say, I do, suddenly the next moment, they are married, and their entire life has changed. And I know there are a lot of testimonies that kind of fit that description of, man, I was going down one path, and then I met Jesus in my life. And maybe not completely changed, but my eyes opened, and I realized I want to follow Jesus now. And I feel like that is similar to like the story of a wedding, where like I know that on September 13th, 2014, at 2:30 p.m., I became a married person. That is a very clear delineation between one thing and another thing. Now I think about other people. Maybe their testimony is more like the story of how they dated a person before they got married. If somebody asked me, when did you fall in love with your wife, Diana? I couldn't really give them an exact day or a moment. I could give them their stories along the way. I know we have our birth date on March 29th, 2013, and I know, man, that was a great day, and I wanted to see her again. I could give you the date when we actually did say I love you to each other. July 6th, 2013, a few months after we started dating. Now, you could say, well, that's the moment. That's the time you fell in love with her. Well, that was the day I said it, but I was probably already in love with her to be able to say that. So, see what I mean? When you talk about the story of two people falling in love, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when that moment happened. I think I see a lot of parallels between that and the story of how I came to walk with Jesus. Now, please don't misunderstand me. That is just an analogy. And I'm not saying that there wasn't a moment when I said yes to Jesus and the Holy Spirit indwelt in me. I think there was a moment like that. My point is, I look back on my story, it's kind of hard to really pinpoint that moment. I do think I know when that moment was, and we will get to that. But first, I wanted to just say why I think it's so hard to give my testimony in a very succinct way. I realize even as I think about what I chose to name this Substack in my book, A Walk with Jesus Down Hope Road, I see it very much as a walk. And there were times when I was very close with Jesus on that walk. There were other times when I kind of veered off into a different direction and he had to run down that road, tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, how about we keep on walking with me? And I'm like, yeah, sorry, I got off track. Let's keep walking. And I think about my testimony as the moment when I was walking with Jesus, I got off course, and he brought me back by his grace. Whether I was the sheep who wandered off aimlessly, and didn't know any better, or I was like the son in the prodigal son that knew what he was doing and deliberately went off. Jesus always came and found me. And that is a big part of my testimony. So, as I said, I do think, even with all that said, it is hard to give a succinct version of my testimony because so many things happen along the way, and I don't know how to touch on those things quickly without being super vague or superficial. So here is what I am going to do, which I wanted to do this for a while, but this Substack gives me a great outlet to do it. Is that I am going to tell my testimony one part at a time through a video, and I will publish one part each month. They will go out on my Substack first. They will be available for both free and paid subscribers, and then I'll probably put them on Facebook and YouTube as well. I'll try to keep each part to about 15 or 20 minutes, and it will cover one little section of my story. Because as Shannon asks, what your parents quit? I mean, a big part of my story is their story. And so I'm thinking in the next part of this little series, I will begin with a little bit of my parents' story. And so that's what we'll do. I don't know how long the whole thing will take. It might take me a couple of years to tell the whole story. But I hope that if you follow along, you can get a full picture of the story of Michael Murray's walk with Jesus down Hope Road. And who knows, maybe then I can take all the videos, transcribe them, edit them, and make a book out of it. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But as we end, I want to know, what do you think about testimonies in general? Would your testimony be hard to give in a little window, 20-minute window? Do you feel like you need more space to tell your story? I'm very curious about what your opinion is about giving testimonies. I'll be back next month with part 2 of my testimony. Thank you for watching.